Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us on the latest, entry to the principal's office. No one here is in trouble. You're here all voluntarily, and we're very excited to have you. Normally, when you go to the principal's office, you did something wrong, but in this case, we're going to hopefully teach you something really cool. My name is John Rath. I am a principal solutions architect here at Dynatrace, and with me are three other fantastic individuals who I'll let introduce themselves, starting with Kyle.
Hey, I'm back. My hands are still huge. If you see any of the marketing promotional materials, they are growing with each every day. I'm the principal solutions engineer for North America, and filling in for me from the West. If you haven't met yet, we are the principals. It is plural. Is a new addition to the channel. Is my counterpart Markie Duby.
Hey guys, my name is Markie Duby. I am principal solution engineer for the West. And glad to kind of hop on this session with these guys. I worked with these guys a lot in the past, so now I actually get to play with them a little bit, which is fun. And we also have Jason Ostrowski on the call.
Yeah, thanks, Markie. Jason Ostrowski, excited to be here. Was on the last installment. I just got to say that the music that comes in right before we get on is awesome. Like I'm jamming the whole time. So anyways, I support the Great Atlantic outside of DC and Virginia. So excited for the session.
Excellent. Well, thanks for the introduction, everyone. Today, what we're going to talk about during this session is really just how you can deploy Dynatrace into Kubernetes. We're going to talk about our operator. This is basically the way to install pretty seamlessly and show you just how easy it is to get those three pillars of observability, which are, of course, metrics, logs, and traces in your environment. So with that being said, I guess we'll dive right in. Let me go ahead and share out my screen here. Okay. Alrighty. So just for full transparency, the way we're doing this here is I don't have an environment built. If I do, kubectl get pods, I won't have any after I authorize anyways.
Do it live.
Nothing in the default namespace, and the namespace we're going to be using here, just so everyone knows, is going to be production, and you'll see that we also have no pods here. So this is actually going to be a brand new environment that we build up with the agent installed, just to show you just how simple and straightforward this is. So the first thing I'm going to do, just to give you an idea of kind of what we get, let's say you don't even have any apps, you just want to monitor Kubernetes, is I'm going to install the Dynatrace one agent, the operator, in here. So I just want you to see just how simple and straightforward this is. So I'm going to go into my environment, and this is an environment that I set up before, and I'm going to go down to deploy Dynatrace. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go to my start installation. And you'll see on this screen here that I've got a lot of different flavors and operating systems that I can support. And what I'm going to do, though, because Kubernetes is where I'm installing, is I'm going to select the Kubernetes OpenShift selector here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually name this cluster, and this is just a name that's friendly in Dynatrace. I'm going to name it Hipster Shop because that's essentially the fake application we're going to be using. For the group, I'm going to just call this one the principal's office, which is not top. It's actually TPO. And I've already downloaded a YAML file just to make things a little easier. But if you're going through this and you're kind of doing this side by side, what you're going to want to do here is you're going to want to create a token, and you're going to want to create a token here as well. And the nice thing about this is Dynatrace will create these tokens for you and fill that into the YAML that you would download. So you don't have to go in there and replace that in the file and manage all that yourself. Because I'm going to skip the SSL check just to make things simple for me. I'm then going to go ahead and turn on volume storage because I am doing this in GKE. And that's basically what I need to do to set everything up. I download the YAML file. Again, I already have that installed. And I'm going to then just go ahead and run through these commands. The first one I'm going to do here, as you can see, is I'm just going to create the namespace for Dynatrace. Very straightforward. I'm then going to apply the operator file that we have. And you can see here, I'm just grabbing it from GitHub. So if you want to check out what it looks like, the code is all there, all source available. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to, while that runs, I'm going to grab this command here. Run that. And what that's doing is that's just going to get the pods going, right? I'm going to get everything going. I'm going to set up the different command operation, the arguments for that. And I'll wait a few seconds for that to finalize. Once that's done, the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to run this command to apply that YAML file that I downloaded earlier to my pods. And the nice thing about this here, as you can see as we go, is that took 4 steps. That's it. And we now have Dynatrace installed. So it's really that easy to get that. What we'll see without having an application built at the moment is that if I go into my menu in Dynatrace, back to this other window here, I will see my workload. It'll take a minute or two to pop in, but I will start to see my workload show up here, which will mean that we have got the data. And we can confirm that our data, or essentially that the deployment went well, is because I can just do get pods, and I can put this in the Dynatrace namespace, and we'll see that they are currently creating. So we'll give that a minute to run. And we'll hope that this error image isn't a problem.
We love doing live demos. That's the best part, is when things start falling apart, right? Because then we can start figuring out what's actually going wrong with it.
Exactly.
Yeah. So the fun part here, right, is like, yeah, we can do this with 4 commands, but the real magic is to kind of build this into your own automation scripts, right? Like, it's really simple to get quick and started, right? But this is sort of like the 101 level of getting these things configured, right? So within that Dynacube YAML, what we have is, while we're waiting just for these pods to come up here, what we have is the ability to kind of leverage any kind of cloud native components, taints, tolerations, to programmatically select specific nodes, or even, as we did maybe last week, target individual namespaces or individual pods for instrumentation. But all of this is all fully automatable, and just a nice, easy way for all those of you following at home to go and sign up for dynatrace.com/trial and give it a shot yourself.
Absolutely. Good call out.
Like I wasn't going to say it.
All righty. And as you can see,
the free trial for sure.
You have to. All right. Our pods are now coming up. So let's go ahead and check and see if we have our cluster data coming in yet. If I go back to my cluster, everything should be set, but I'm not seeing it yet. One more try. Typing is hard.
John seems to have the same problem that I do. Is I can't type when people are looking. Immediately my fingers grow in 5 inches. As you've seen, my hands continue to grow large.
It is impossibly hard to do that. All right, so we're just going to give this a minute to come up. It looks like the pods are coming up. Our active gate being the last one to spin up. It may just be that the cluster I have is a little undersized, but we'll give it a second.
And one thing to note here as well with John's kind of doing is that active gate piece, that last piece that we're kind of waiting for here, that's really the piece that's going to do all of our connections to things like the Kubernetes API and the cluster itself. And that's going to give us that top level view. And that's what this dashboard that John's looking at is going to show us, is that top level view. So, right, if we go in and look for something like our host, we're going to see those individual hosts from our cluster showing up, but we want that real full cluster view, because that's what everybody from a Kubernetes operation standpoint wants. This last piece, this active gate, is going to give us that overarching view that's coming through.
That is correct. And it looks like it is coming up, which is great. Had me sweating there a little bit. So we should see this in just a minute here. Shouldn't take too long. But while we wait on that, what we'll do is we'll just go ahead and install the actual application layer so that we can start getting that rich level of data. So the way we're going to do that is we're going to take the Hipster Shop repo, and we're just going to basically pull it down. And I've already done that. And you can see if I show you the directory here, I've got this little D2 boutique application already ready to go. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to run a YAML file to essentially apply those or essentially start those pods and get them nice and going. And once that's done, I put it in the default namespace because I actually forgot to put it in the production namespace, but that's fine. We'll just go ahead and look and see those pods as they come up in real time. And we can see now if I run that, we've got our deployments. They are building as we speak. And what I can do now is just go back here and check to see if we're getting our Kubernetes data. And there is our actual cluster. It is now coming through. So the data is beginning to stream in. And we can see right now that we're starting to get the node level data as well as all my event level data. And this is what we got before any applications are coming through. So this is going to be kind of your highest level of data around your node utilization, your workloads, as they come through, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. One nice thing to note also is that with that simple install, we also get log data from the platform itself. And you can see our logs now showing here, which are going to be, in this case, primarily related to our actual platform. So the platform level logs, the actual dynamics of the environment, as well as your, the orchestration level details is essentially available in those 4 easy steps. But that's not all. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, that's pretty awesome, John. While we're waiting for that stuff to spin up, can you crack into one of those logs and see how Dynatrace is looking at it?
Yeah,
because what I think is super cool about this is that it's not just like some dumb log message that just has the content in it. You got to, chop it up and parse it out yourself, but we actually discover a lot of those attributes itself, and then we put it into the entity model of Dynatrace. And what I mean by that is, so you can see within here, and the text is a little small, but you can see like the host, you can see the Kubernetes cluster it's running on, all the things that log message actually relates to. So it's not just logs, but it's logs within context, which I think is pretty awesome.
Yeah, and actually, just to jump on that, that's such a good point to make. Is that, like you said, this context here, these attributes are created for you out of the box. There was no configuration done on my end to get this level of data. I didn't have to set up these entities. I didn't have to map any of this to any specific log level information or line level data. This is what Dynatrace is able to pull out directly by doing its own set of correlation from what we see, from those different entities that we're monitoring via the one agent. So it's a really, really powerful portion of the platform. Thanks, Jason, for mentioning that.
Yeah, and you make a really good point there, John, is the fact that it is actually doing all of this out of the box, right? We didn't have to go in and tell, Dynatrace anything about our cluster itself. We didn't have to tell it anything about the hipster shop application or the boutique application. None of that. It actually just picked all of that up out of the box.
Excellent point. And I know that this popped up just on the chat for other viewers, but if you do have questions, absolutely, please shout them out. The questions are what make this fun and interactive. So if there's something you want to see that we don't address, just let us know so we can absolutely dive into that. Now, that being said, Markie, again, great point about this being out of the box. I'm just going to go back into my cloud instance here, and I'm just going to check one thing real fast. I'm going to check my pods, and I see that my hipster shop is now running. And what I can do is I can actually run a command, which I got to find because I never remember it off the top of my head. And I'm going to then go ahead and pull this. I'm going to pull the IP address that I want to hit so that I can actually see the real user monitoring. And if I run that, I get this external IP, which feel free to hit it, everyone. And if you can't view that, what I can do is I can share this. So you guys can, DDoS my demo application with real user traffic. And one of the nice things we can see here, if I go into my network view and I click, is our agent has been automatically injected for us. I did not have to do any type of manual stitching to get my real user data streaming into the platform. This occurred with the one agent simply being installed. And if I add some items to the cart, so I'm just going to go through some transactions. Don't worry, this is all fake. You're not using your real money, although I would not recommend you put your actual credit card information in here. Probably don't want to do that. You will start to see, as we go through this, some real user data will start to come into Dynatrace, which I'm going to walk through here in just a moment. But I think it's really, really neat, from just an engineering standpoint, that you're able to install an operator and suddenly you are seeing your traffic.
So, John, while you're on that log page, or of course, as soon as I say that, you go to a different page. There's 2 good questions in the chat. So one of them is, can it read any type of log?
That is a good question. Do you want to take that one?
Well, yeah. So Dynatrace will automatically discover the relevant log files that are, for your cryo, Docker, containerd runtimes. If it's on the actual VM itself, right? If you're sitting at an OS level, it'll pick up the process logs, the host logs, all of that stuff and auto discover it. But then you can also stream logs to Dynatrace, which is really cool as well. So say you don't have an agent, or it's a technology that maybe you're already leveraging Fluentd Logstash, right? You can stream that data to Dynatrace's log API, and we can ingest those log messages as well. So, and then we'll pop into the chat there our documentation page on log ingest. So yeah, lots of different options to get logs into Dynatrace.
I'm glad I gave that to you. You gave me a better answer than I would have given. All right, I think we got another question in here. Does the agent reach back to a main server for diagnosis? All right, so that's actually a really good question as well. So the way it's going to work is essentially you can think of the agent more as a forwarder than anything else. It's going to collect the data, it's going to do some light bundling of that data, and it's going to send that to the Dynatrace cluster for analysis and any additional work that needs to be done. Things like correlation, things between different entities, things like the mapping, and then of course the real time. Diagnostics that come with like root cause analysis and stuff like that. The reason that's important to mention, and that's such a good question, Kenneth, is that it makes the agent so lightweight. When you install this, you don't see high overhead and large utilization from your agent. You're actually getting a large amount of value with such a small amount of overhead. It's one of the things I like the most about it. Now, just by the way, I did mention something, so I want to show what I'm talking about. When I say the correlation, what I mean is this. This is what we call our smartscape. Kenneth, I see your question. I'll get to it in just a moment. And so what essentially this is going to be essentially a real-time entity map of your environment. So basically, it's a dynamic topology of your services, your processes, and your hosts, and the way they communicate to one another. And a nice thing about this as well is if we click on just, let's say, this node, for example, I can see that the Dynatrace One Agent discovered all these processes that are running. It can show me the services that are essentially executing code on those processes. And I can see how they trace all the way up to the front end. And I get this, again, without having to do any of this manually. This is all auto-discovered by the One Agent. So maybe the question we have, is this a secure connection? Does anyone from our group want to take it?
Yeah, I can jump in on that one, right? So
Kyle, your mic's
no,
doing.
Kyle,
yeah.
we're going to ask you not to because you're corrected in.
Markie, do you got this one?
Yeah, I can take this one. And we'll share out a link here in the chat as well because Jason grabbed that for us. But absolutely, this is a secured connection. Everything that Dynatrace does across the board, no matter what communication is happening, is all through HTTPS. So it is encrypted end-to-end over the wire. And then if you are using our Dynatrace SaaS platform, it's also encrypted at rest. Right? So we're making sure we're keeping that secure right across the board from that side.
Another great question. And again, please keep them coming. We want to answer as many as we can. So thank you, Markie, for that. That was a perfect explanation. And there is some documentation that Jason has linked. So feel free to take a look at that. Now, what I want to do next is I want to show you something really, really cool. So as I mentioned before, our user data is coming through, and we can actually see right now we got a decent number of transactions. Now, to disclose, what I did ahead of time is I actually created in the capturing section, I added a user tag. And what I did here is I just took a SOP session ID from the cookie value. And I just said, Dynatrace, when you see this, extract it. And the reason I did this is because when I look at my user segmentation, what I can do is I can see all the users that have come in. One of those being very, very, very clever. A few of them actually. And I can actually tag my users to know who is who and what they're doing. So I actually now have the capability of understanding, let's say one of my users is upset because they can't check out. They call my customer support line. Well, if I know who that user is, I can dive into their session and I can actually take a look and see what they did. So I actually have the ability now, just through that, again, installing that one agent and one configuration change, which, by the way, doesn't require any type of changes to the agent or the JavaScript that's being injected. That's all handled for you. I'm able to actually see this level of data very, very quickly. And if I click into my user session, as you can see here, I can see the actions that occurred, as well as if I click on one of the, essentially more details of the actual page. So if I just perform waterfall analysis, I'm able to see, that deep diagnostic view, that waterfall chart of my session and what occurred on the front end, as well as I can trace it back to my back end performance on, the what we call our pure paths, but they're basically traces. And if I click this here, I can see my end-to-end transaction. So now I can go back to my server side and I can see the portion there. One more thing that I think is super neat about this is I can see my logs in context. So, as Jason said before, we're of course going to show you logs and we're going to show you the different entities that matter, but we take it a step further. We actually show you the logs as they relate to your spans and your traces. So if I view this log here, it takes me back to my log viewer. And what I'm able to do now, as this loads for a moment or two, I'll be able to show all the logs that occurred on this trace, as you can see here. And if I click into one of these logs, one of the nice things, I didn't go hunt for this earlier, but I can also go the other direction. I could be viewing logs. I could have a certain amount of criteria that I'm filtering on, and then I could view the user sessions or traces in context to my log. So it's bidirectional, and it gives us answers in context of our logs and our metrics. I think we got a few questions, so maybe we'll take some of those.
Yeah, John, I think it might be good if you go back to that pure path view, it might be a good way for us to talk through one of the questions, which was around the difference between a service and a process.
That is a good one.
It is a really good one, and it's a very common question that we get. This is one of those use cases where you kind of want to think of it as a tangible entity versus kind of intangible or code level. So a process, that's a tangible entity. That's your executable. That's the actual process that's running on your box. You can pull up Task Manager on Windows and see it, right? You can search for that in Linux. That's the process itself that's there. The service is kind of the internals of that. And we see this a lot more with more monolithic traditional applications where you probably have multiple different code modules inside of that process that are handling different kinds of transactions. One of those code modules may be something that's listening for inbound web requests. One module may be something that's pulling messages off of a messaging queue. But those two different code modules are really performing completely different tasks, completely different transactions. So what Dynatrace does is we automatically break those up into their own separate services so that we can actually do things like baselining and do this type of tracking down to that individual code level so that when we let you know, hey, there's a slowdown or there's an issue on this particular service, we're not just telling you, hey, go look at this process and all of its code. We're telling you this is a specific piece of code, this is the specific service that you need to focus on.
That's exactly right. And honestly, I think that's the best explanation I've ever heard of the service.
I was just going to say the same. Like, I need to steal that explanation because that was really good.
That was perfect. Good. Hopefully that answered the question. Let us know if you need a little bit more information. But that was a great answer. Another question I see is how are the DT licenses calculated for collecting platform logs? Does it fall part of full stack monitoring? So that's an excellent question. So essentially the logs come in under what we call our DDUs, and that's just a consumption-based model. And it's going to be, you pay for what you ingest more or less. And it's a pretty straightforward, thing to set up, and then we can give you an idea of what that looks like. So if you're interested in pricing, of course, let us know. We can get you to the right people to give you a much more educated answer than the one I gave you just now.
Yeah, it's all about the ingest, right? The amount of log events that you're bringing in. So scales with the amount that you want to bring in.
Cool. And I'm just checking. I don't think those are the only questions we got so far, I think. So great. Excellent. Thank you for all those questions again, everyone, and keep them coming. So that is essentially that full stack level of monitoring. And again, just to kind of recap what you're getting from this, just out of the box, getting logs, you're getting metrics, you're getting traces, and it took 4 lines of code to actually install that. And if you install the agent first, it doesn't require any type of restart or anything like that. You just plug it in, you're good to go. And hopefully you see just how easy that is. One other thing I did want to show while we're here is, logs are valuable, useful pieces of information, and you can create, metrics on them. So in this example here, I could create a metric based on something like log level, right? Another thing I can do is I can actually look at my facets and attributes over here on the left-hand side, and I can use those to create or populate a view for me. So I've created some favorites, and all you have to do that, by the way, is just scroll down and see one you like and go ahead and add that. It's that easy. And I can use these now to very quickly sort through my logs. So in this case here, if I want to, I can come in and I can grab something like, the event reason. I can look at the different cluster names. I can dive into whether this is, maybe the cause of a problem, as the, Davis AI has determined. And this gives me a lot of power to very quickly understand, the state of my application with just these very simple toggles here. And if I wanted to, if I just remove this one now, I could construct my own log, search. So I could do something like status equals error, and we'll see if there's any logs that have an error. And we got some. And so what I could do then is I could create a metric based on this. And it's as simple as clicking this, and it's going to take me to our metric creation screen. And I created one earlier, but just to show you what this looks like, is the first thing you're going to do is you're going to give it a name or a key. In this case, I'd say status error. And I can then just go ahead and add the dimension based on the occurrence of the logs. I could also do it based on an attribute value, if I wanted to do that. But I really just want to know how many times it's occurring. So I could add that dimension, which, oops, what did I do wrong there? Let me close that out because I don't need that. Save that. Don't need that dimension button being pressed. And now I have that new metric. And I can find that if I go over into my metrics over here on the left-hand side. And if I click, let's say just log as my search criteria, I can see the metric I created earlier, which is still collecting data for me. And I can then also see the metric I just now created, or maybe I can't because this probably still needs to come in. That'll show up in a minute. But in the meantime, if I create a chart based on that metric that I actually decided I wanted to use as a metric, I can also add facets. So I can say that, what is the log level here? And I can run the query. And I guess that one doesn't have any data. So let's see if this one does. So this would actually be breaking it down by the source. Where's my log coming from? But maybe this graph isn't super useful to me. It doesn't really tell me that much. So what I could do instead is I could say, well, I want this to be a heat map, and I want to break this down by the actual dimension that it's coming from. Maybe I don't like purple, not my favorite color, so I'll do red. And now I have a nice heat map of my logs by source with the, that come with an elevated status, whether it's a warning or an error. And I can then add this to a dashboard. As you can see, I can pin it. If I pin it there, I can open it. And you'll see that I did this earlier just to make sure everything worked. And there's a dashboard. And you can do this with really any metric or any type of data you want to pull in to create this kind of visualization. That's a good question. So Wyatt's asking, can we search the content for values? How do we want to handle this one?
So yes. So if you go back to the logs, yeah, you can go and filter out by content. So for instance, if you want to just search for, I don't know, the word error in there, or, DT trace ID, anything like that, you can just search for the content right within there. But also, say your log message has some relevant information in there that may not be parsed automatically. A lot of the times we are parsing things as attributes, but so say you just had, 200 and 500 and 1.2 in your log content. And you're like, well, what does that mean? Is 200 my error code? Is 500 my error code? Is 1.2 a revenue value? And there's nothing like good descripting that within the actual log content itself. So what you can actually do is we have parsing and processing pipelines where you can actually go through there and actually parse out that yourself and say what those values mean, make them as attributes, and therefore chart them out over time, build dashboards on those, build alerts on those. So the answer is yes. It depends on kind of how that log is coming in, but if it has a good, nice key value pair, we'll pick up that automatically. If not, you got that parsing engine that parse out those values and allow you to, dashboard, alert, all that good stuff off of those values in that log content.
Excellent answer. Thank you for that.
Does my mic work any better yet?
Not yet, unfortunately.
It's miserable.
It's robot-y and fuzzy.
Another question came in. Do you have any best practices documented on setting up alerts for Kubernetes clusters from platform and application? This one I don't know about. Anyone else? I'm sure we do.
We do actually. So we've got actually some GitHub repos. I'll see if we can find the reference here of different ways and different common examples that we see from Kubernetes cluster and how to set up some of those custom metrics. We actually do have some things in our pipeline as well where we're going to be augmenting that, but we have some built-in alerts around that. But there's also some best practices that we have on a GitHub page from our PMs actually directly that just kind of give some common examples and what we see for that. So I'll see if I can grab that link and we can share that out in chat as well.
Absolutely. Thank you for that, Markie. Let us know if you need any additional help with those questions, but that's a very good one. One thing to note too, just so everyone is aware, right? We do have, like she said, those out of the box alerts, but we can also create our own, right? If we want to create a custom event based on a log entry or something that we're seeing in Kubernetes, all we have to do is come in here and create them. And the nice thing about having that, the actual integration with Kubernetes that we have that you get with just the operator being installed is that a lot of these things come out of the box. So you can just flick on and, and start actually getting those alerts set up for you. So as you can see here, we've got a bunch of these that are based on things like low disk space, increased growth rate, so it just gives you an idea of how to set that up. And it's very simple. You just kind of create a criteria based on entity and a threshold, or you create a dynamic baseline that's going to alert based on previous expected values versus the current state of real. Very good question.
And John, one thing I wanted to add on there is that a lot of conditions we're already picking up on automatically through the Davis AI engine, right? So if you've got slowdowns on applications or errors or, basically anomalies on the application, we'll pick up that stuff automatically and then create problem tickets for that. So a lot of the times, we're starting off with customers and they're just, let Dynatrace start baselining your apps, learning what's normal. And then very quickly, if there's anything that's outside of the norm, you'll get alerted on that. And then everything on top of that, you can add in your custom thresholds, your custom alerts for the conditions you want to be warned about as well.
Yeah, that's a great point. And just in case someone, maybe didn't catch it, what Jason's saying here is that not only will the Davis AI give you out of the box alerting and problem detection with analysis, but you can also tie in whatever metrics you want, have those automatically baseline for you, and have that same level of data fidelity and deep dive diagnostics that the Davis AI is going to provide, just acted upon those custom events that you've defined. So you really get the best of both worlds. You get this wonderful out of the box system that's able to find problems for you, but you can also define your own, maybe very custom, very tailored issues that might be unique to your environment. We'll call them boutique errors. And we can actually then go ahead and, help you find the root cause with the Davis AI. As you're seeing here, just so everyone's aware, this is that problem screen. And, this application, we didn't program it to fail. We should have. But you can see that it's actually picking up just some things from a host and monitoring standpoint. So we had another cluster connected earlier that we disconnected, and we can actually see right here that it's no longer available. So in this case, there's not a lot to show because the agent was uninstalled. The cluster was, down scaled. So there's just, it's saying, okay, well, there's no data when we expect it to be here. But one thing I did pull up earlier was our demo environment, just so I could show you, I'll zoom in a little bit here, what it might look like if you have actual problems in your environment. And as you can see here, these are, this is the environment and here are the different problems. And I can see the associated root cause for these is shown with the impact and the problem. And so when we talk about when we talk about root cause and we talk about a deterministic AI, what we're actually saying here is being able to show you down to the code level where that problem occurred with the number of impacted users. So giving you a business impact, all of this wrapped up in, the automatic detection that comes with Davis. And so as you can see on the screen here, I know the number of my users of my total cohort that were affected. I can tell you which parts of the actual application were impacted during the problem, and I can play it back actually in real time to see kind of how it propagated through my system, giving me a very clear visual idea of where my problem originated from and how it affected those those distributed connected services. And then if I go back to my problem here, I can drill down into what actually caused it. In this case, if I click into this particular service execution, I can see that the AI was able to recognize that the code execution time wildly expanded from where it was expected to be to where it actually is in the real world. And if I dive into the method hotspot, what I can see is the actual code level details. I'll just click hotspot to save myself some time of where that time is coming from. And we have 2 questions in the chat. I think the first question about machine learning will be answered really well by that link. So I'm going to refer everyone to check that out. The second question, though, is how accurate is impacted users? I'm a company man, and they pay me to say this. It's 100% accurate. I think it's pretty accurate, though, if not like joking around. I've never heard of a customer complaining that this was inaccurate data. You guys are in the same boat, I assume?
I haven't had any problems with that. What's also cool is you can go and see some of those user sessions that were affected by the problem. And so what's cool about that is you have it within context. You can go and see which user sessions, the response times of those actions, any error rates that were increased. So you can see it from the user action perspective. And then, of course, the subsequent traces and dig into all of that data underneath it. So it's explainable. There's data behind it, and you can dig in as deep as you want. But the real cool part about the problem ticket, and I think the most valuable part about the problem ticket is, you don't have to dig into each individual user click and each individual trace to understand what the overall impact of a problem was, and then what the root cause of a problem was. But that's me with my pitch.
Yeah, and honestly, just to fall into that, try it yourself. If you're curious, if you're skeptical, if you're on the fence, download the trial and just see if it lines up to what the reality is. And I think you'll be pleasantly surprised that it is accurate. Otherwise, I don't think we could put our name on it.
Yeah, I mean, those are the users that we're actually seeing hitting that application, hitting those services. I mean, that's where we're pulling those numbers from. We're not, making something up. It's coming from the data underneath. And that's one of the things that we see a lot of groups using as well, is they use that to kind of help prioritize, right? This issue is affecting 500 users. This one's affecting 5 users. Which one should we fix first, right? Those are the kind of things that you can really kind of help build out from that perspective.
Absolutely. Thank you. That was a great question. And just, so you guys are aware as well, well, I should say everyone is aware. You're able to, add comments to a problem ticket. You're able to, collaborate with your team this way, let people know if it was solved, if there's a problem still, which just gives you a little bit, again, you can use this to essentially treat your errors or your production issues or your pre-prod issues, what have you, in real time in a collaborative fashion. That's another great use case here. Okay, so we got a little time left. I'll go back into our principal's office environment. And I guess this would be a good time for any additional questions, or I can think of some fun things to show you if we don't have any. While I'm waiting for any of those, just so everyone here is aware, this is just a dashboard that comes out of the box, and you can see just very easily. I can sort by cluster, and I can sort by what's called a management zone, which I haven't covered. It's actually a good topic to jump into, and it gives you kind of your high level overview. And this is just an example of the kind of dashboard you can put together in Dynatrace to make sure that you have all of your data on glass if that's where you want it to be. What's the best way to monitor Kubernetes but not choose to pull all logs? That is an excellent question. So I'll take a stab at it, and then I'll open it to the rest of the group. My recommendation would be to, if you don't want to pull the logs, that's totally understandable. But one thing I would highly recommend enabling is events, because if you pull the data in through the event stream, you'll be able to get a lot of that data that you typically get through just a standard logging solution in the context of your cluster. And you can then marry that to your cluster workloads, your pods, your node health and utilization, as well as the different aspects of the various dynamics of your namespaces to give you a pretty complete picture of your environment. And that doesn't require a ton of log ingest to manage that. That'd be my way of approaching that. Of course, having logs, metrics, and traces, having all three is recommended because you get more information, you get more context, and knowledge is power. But at the same time, we understand that that may not be what everyone wants to do for various reasons. And so that'd be my recommended approach. I don't know, Jason, Markie, Kyle, any other add-ons?
I would also say that it's not sorry, Markie, you want to go?
No, go ahead.
Okay. I'd also say it's not an all or nothing approach, right? You can say, maybe I have some workloads, maybe some applications are more critical, right? And therefore I want to bring logs in for those. Maybe ones that are more, downstream, they don't have a lot of user traffic. Maybe I don't want to bring in those logs. You can select that within the Dynatrace UI and say exactly what logs you do want to ingest or do not want to ingest. So it is flexible that way.
That's a great point.
Yeah, that was my only note as well. So it's an option, right? You don't have to have the logs turned on. You don't have to ingest all of it, right? It's completely customizable from your side to be able to kind of pick and choose what you want to pull in there. And to John's point, those events really are going to be kind of invaluable. So I do strongly encourage those. And you can kind of pick and choose from a log perspective which ones you want to pull in.
Am I still a robot?
No, you're so much better.
No, you're back.
I got to tell you, being silent for 22 minutes is just, I didn't realize how much it was going to affect me, but it was really, really hard. I think some of the other things our friend answering the question, Wyatt, here has kind of hit the nail on the head, right? There's a lot of noisy things. And I was literally just going to go directly after health checks. Who cares about health check, right? There's a lot of fun things that Dynatrace does right out of the box, right? Is understanding how a health check works, right? If your pod isn't up and running, to John's point, enabling events, you already have that data. So you don't need to actually add additional, logging needs. Log health checks. It says, I'm okay. Because Dynatrace does that natively through events, and it's also going to do that through point-to-point communication with distributed tracing, right? Context is king, and Howard actually just said it right in the comment. You guys I think we got some plants in the audience today, right? Context is king. Without data in context, there's you've got nothing, right? You're just guessing. You've got metrics on a dashboard or metrics that one team cares about. Best practices, health checks are useful, right? But if your pods are running, right, application performance is really a better indicator of health, right? And understanding the events in tandem with that, and then programmatically selecting those logs that actually matter, that would be my recommendation on best practices. And one of the other things I really wanted to kind of jump back to, right, is when we're parsing that log content, right, when we're looking at the contextual, like, hey, what are these things in the logs? John showed us how to build metrics on top of that. So if there's something in that log, like maybe the amount of logins that have been successful, maybe logins that have failed, right? We can start trending data on top of that. And that's a much better indicator in health than is my thing up, right? Because uptime is a useful metric, but it is not a contextual metric, right? It's a point in time.
Yeah, that's an amazing point. And it actually ties into the next thing I wanted to show, right? Uptime, availability, right? Understanding how you're doing against maybe your set targets, your SLAs that you have with maybe third-party businesses. That's something that we can help out as well with our service level objective feature. Now, I didn't have the foresight to set any of these up in this environment before this, but one thing I can show you is in our demo environment, good old reliable here. If I go into my service level objectives, you can see that we have some that have been built out for demonstration, purposes. And you can see that what we can do here is we can set up our target, so our error budget. We can set the warning threshold, the target threshold, and then I can see my status in real time. And just like anything else in Dynatrace, we do this in context of current open problems, closed problems, the entire observability stack. So this isn't some SLO on an island that you have to then refer back to some trace to try and understand where the problem occurred. No, if there's a problem, you can actually dive into the problems that occurred in the past and then dive into, that actual problem. This one is coming from, I believe, an open telemetry synthetic monitor, but I'm still able to dive into the actual service and analyze those failures that occurred that are impacting my SLOs in real time. So I'm actually able to give business contextual answers to a business question. Why am I missing my SLA? Well, as you can see, it's because I had these errors that occurred, and we need to do something about that. And I'm just going to touch back on a point that Kyle made earlier too, before I forget. We have actually worked with a ton of customers who have reduced their logging footprint by a lot. When you start to see the value of Dynatrace and being able to get answers in context of your full stack, you no longer are reliant on logs only. Logs are an incredibly crucial tool to understanding your application's health and reliability, but it doesn't need to be the only tool in your toolkit. You can maybe cut back on some of those noisy logs that you've been using historically, or if you're a developer trying to find a single problem, your line items that you add to find that in the console. And you can use a tool, like Dynatrace to find that in real time in production anytime something goes wrong. So I just think it's worth repeating, because I've worked with a lot of operators, kind of in the cloud native space. And to tell someone that they don't maybe need all the logs they have is almost blasphemous. But I can tell you that I've won those people over, and I'm happy to work with you, have a conversation, and show you how we, could probably help you reduce some of that log footprint as well. And now I'm off my soapbox. Anyone else have anything they want to add?
Can we double click on the logs within context piece there, John? I think we talked about it. We showed user trace or user session in the trace and the logs, but how does someone get that up and running? Do they need to change their application? Is that something that, that maybe they have to add into how they're logging out? How do they actually get logs connected to a trace or user session within Dynatrace?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. And the good answer, the best answer, is that it's really easy. So you're going to go into your settings here. And if you're, going through this and you want to understand how to, do this on your own, you would just go into your preferences. You go into your one agent features. And this is going to be kind of where all those nice features are available, but not maybe turned on right away, because maybe we don't want to, associate additional cost or what have you. And if you search for log, you'll see that you now have the ability to add trace and span context enrichment to your logs. You just turn these things on. And once you do that, it's going to, I believe, ask you to restart your process, and the instrumentation is there. So the next time your process is started and you start to collect data, you will then have the log enrichment as part of your logs. And you can actually see that if you go into your log itself and we find one that has a trace, we can see that these ones have been enriched as part of the message. So it's that simple.
And I find this to be super cool, because a lot of the times you're seeing from maybe the user perspective, there's an issue, or maybe they're getting a 500 error, and it's like, so what's actually going on underneath? And then going into the trace shows them maybe the 500, clicking onto the logs, you get the actual error message, and then know what to do about it. So I just wanted you to show that again, because I think it's the coolest thing ever. I'm super jazzed about it. So yeah, thanks, John.
Yeah, no, thanks. That was a great suggestion. All right. The last thing to really show everyone is going to be around synthetic monitoring, because what we see if we go back into our web, right? If I click in here and I can see my application, I'm able to see if there was any problems. I can see my actions as they occurred, but maybe I want to see some more availability data. And what I can do with this is I can just set up a synthetic monitor. So what I do is I would just put the URL in there, and I'll just grab this here. Oops. I can use copy and paste. Put that there. I think it was a 7 at the end. Yeah. And I'm going to name this one Hipster Shop. I have a name. They don't like this because I'm missing part of that URL. And I'm going to go ahead and just, it's going to be a very basic. It's just going to hit it. So what I can do is I can either do this in script mode, or I can do this in visual mode. And it's occurring to me that I don't think I have the recorder installed. So I'll have to probably not do it that way. But essentially what I would do is I would install the Diatribe synthetic recorder. That's a plugin you can have on your browser. So let's go ahead and I guess just do that real fast. We'll add this to Chrome, add the extension. We have it. We are good. So if I go back into my browser, I'll just do a little refresh here. Got to get my URL again. Grab that, go back to my browser. And then I'll go ahead and not use any type of login. I don't need that. I can set cookies here if I need to. I can do some type of content security policy if I need to bypass that. I can capture performance metrics in the frame, which I will do. And then I can go ahead and go hit next. And I can determine where I want this to run. In this case, if I just want to hit the website, I don't need to really add anything extra here. But I can go ahead and do, let's just say I want this to run from Beijing and I want this to run from Singapore. I go next. And I have my monitor set up. I didn't do any type of recording here, but this would then just hit that specific URL. I can create my monitor, and we'll see over time it's going to set up, and then it's going to run from those endpoints. And this is a great way to get reliable data over time of the performance of my, my front end. And you'll see when the data populates that when these scripts execute, the results are going to be in context of your entire Kubernetes cluster. So if there was an issue on a pod level, or if there's an issue at that service level, we'll see it here and actually be able to dive down from the synthetic monitor, all the way down into the code, just like we did with a real user transaction. And this is a great way to flesh out some of those, if maybe you're just getting started with monitoring, you want to create an SLO, you don't have a lot of user traffic yet. This is a great way to maybe test out some of those values, or at least get an idea, set up some availability practices within your organization, and move towards the greater SRE goal of 100% uptime. I know it's 5 nines, but let's say 100% because we all, of course, want to be up all the time.
Full disclaimer, Dynatrace does not condone trying to maintain 100% uptime, as it will make you utterly insane. And 5 nines is pretty good, but we'll help you get close.
I say go for it. If you're not going to pull your hair out, just make it a goal.
I can't.
Yeah, you tried to go for 100%, didn't you?
That's why I work at Dynatrace now.
So let this populate for just a minute. It may take a minute or two just because it is going to pull data and then it's going to execute off of those different endpoints. So in the meantime, again, a great time for questions if we have any.
Yeah, and while that's loading, I just want to kind of emphasize what John is doing here from a synthetic standpoint is this is really great in combination with your existing real user monitoring data, right? It's about the merger of the two, because when you're looking at things like real user monitoring data, right, you can't predict what your end users are going to do. They're going to click on something weird. They're going to take a path you didn't expect. They're going to use a browser or a machine you never would have thought to test. You can't predict that. So that's where the real user monitoring data really comes into play, because you're seeing your actual end user's experience. The benefit here of adding the synthetic on top of that is you want to be proactive, right? You don't want to wait for your end users to hit that issue. You want to find it first. So rather than having something that your end user is going to run into an issue at, say, 8 o'clock in the morning when they come into the office, have your synthetic testing running before that, right? At 2 o'clock in the morning, you've caught the issue. Maybe you can actually fix it before your end users start coming in, right? So it's about that proactive, and it's using those two methods in combination. And to John's point, it's the same exact context you would get for real user monitoring. So you see that all the way back into your Kubernetes cluster, down into the pods, same type of tracking and monitoring there.
Absolutely. That's a great point. Thank you for that. And as we can see, there should be an execution coming through here in just a moment. But we can actually just go back to our on-demand that I ran. And we can see that it did run successfully. So it's probably just finalizing that. So while that cooks, again,
It's taking its sweet time.
It is, of course. It's when you want to show something that it's going to take as much time as possible.
One of the things I like to really use our synthetics for, right, is the fun part about using like the browser monitors, right, is it actually creates an actual user agent. So a user it's not just like a script, right, that hits an endpoint, tries to render something, right? You can use it to go and actually do a login, or try to add something to the cart, right? You can put it onto that user session. Yes, we do support MFA casting. The cool part about that is it also generates the backend traffic, right? So if somebody goes to hit login, it'll create that actual call chain that'll make that database call. So putting synthetics into a lower environment as you're developing new code, as you're pushing out a new feature, can actually help you kind of identify a new bottleneck or a new problem that, enabling a new feature flag in your environment, or maybe just putting in a new version or changing an application or a service endpoint, how that actually will perform before you move into production. It's really helpful.
That's a great point. One of the use cases I've seen, to your point, is with feature flags. You turn that feature flag on and you do an API request for the script to kick off, and you can then test to make sure that there's no, instant problems. And it's a great way of kind of setting up this level of reliability within your organization. Alrighty. So as I'm still waiting for this to populate with data, we may not get that to come through before the top of the hour, but that's okay.
I think J Rock is playing us off here. I think he's pulling the cook from stage left.
Yeah, it looks like it. And it looks like it may have been a user error because I'm getting a failure, a timeout. So it could possibly be that I put the wrong URL in there. I'm guessing that's what it was. Oh, well, that's a live demonstration for you. Mistakes happen. All right, so we have heard the sound to get off stage. So I just want to say on behalf of Dynatrace, thank you so much for joining us today. It was a pleasure, and I hope that we were able to answer your questions and show you something really valuable. Anything else? Any closing remarks?
Just thanks, John, for doing the hard work today and actually running it and running the live demo. So great job, man.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, likewise. We just get to show up.
Yeah.
Oh, your turn's coming. Don't worry.
Man, we got some Dynatrace royalty in the audience today. We got Andy Grabner's hanging out. I saw some of our product team as well. Shout out to my boy Robert Axelson. Miss you, bro. One of our guys out in the Lens Lab. I guess a good opportunity to plug your upcoming session, Jason.
Yeah, so I'll do application security on October 11th. We'll dive into vulnerability detection and automatic risk prioritization right within the Dynatrace platform itself. No new agents to install, just toggling it right on. So I'm super excited about that. Again, October 11th, application security.
I don't know. Do we have anything else? We need a better outro. We need to come up with one really quick. Maybe a giant jazz hands.
Giant jazz hands. I like that.
Okay.
All right. And if anyone wants to, contribute a royalty-free version of an outro song, please. We are taking submissions. We're taking donations for that. Not financial donations, please. Don't get me in trouble. But just a song. That's what we want. A beautiful piece of music.
Yeah. Killer Mike, if you're out there somewhere. What are you gonna do?
Hey, worth a try, right? You never know. Maybe he's a performance head. This is his thing.
Might. I could see it. I can see it.
All right. Well, thanks everyone. Take care.
Thanks for joining us. We'll catch you next time on the Principal's Office. Freeze frame.